Laputa. Okay, so when you hear that name, chances are you're thinking of the amazing floating island from Studio Ghibli's Castle in the Sky, right?
Absolutely, it's iconic.
But what if there's more to it? Like, what if that movie, that story, actually touches on some, well, really surprising real-world stuff?
Mm-hmm.
So today, our deep dive isn't just about the film. It's about unlocking some of those aha moments, you know, finding connections you might not expect. And this all came about because you were curious.
Exactly. And we're heading down a pretty fascinating path here, linking Miyazaki's fictional Laputa with a real historical group, the Laputa people.
Laputa, right.
Yeah, an ancient seafaring culture. They spread right across the Pacific, left behind these incredible stone structures, megaliths. And you shared some great sources, including that YouTube transcript that really digs into this specific connection.
Right.
So our mission really is to look at these overlaps, these intriguing little threads, and pull out the most surprising bits.
Okay, good plan. But first, let's just quickly make sure we're clear on the names. It's easy to mix them up.
Definitely.
So we've got Laputa, that's the flying castle in the movie, Castle in the Sky.
Right, the fictional one.
And then we have the Laputa people. They're the historical, real-world culture. Very different things, obviously separated by, well, ages and geography.
Huge gaps, yeah. But as we'll see, there are these weirdly interesting points where they seem to kind of echo each other.
So that YouTube video you mentioned, it kicks things off by looking at this potential link. And it brings in a researcher, Dr. Takuchi Katsuta.
That's right. He studies petroglyphs, ancient rock carvings.
Oh, okay.
And he apparently saw some, let's say, potential overlaps, shared themes or imagery between the movie and what we know or think we know about the Laputa culture.
That definitely makes you sit up and listen.
Yeah.
But the video itself says pretty quickly that a direct link, like Miyazaki consciously basing Laputa on the Laputa, is, well, probably not the case, right?
Highly improbable, yeah. The timelines, the sources, they just don't really mesh in that direct way.
Okay.
So, let's pin down the names. Laputa, the real people. Where does that name come from?
Good question.
It's actually quite straightforward, according to the source. It's geographical. It comes from the specific type of pottery, Laputa pottery, found at a site in New Caledonia.
Ah, so named after the place.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
The place where the first big archaeological finds happened. So the name itself doesn't have some deep ancient meaning. It's tied to the location.
Got it. Laputa, place name.
Yeah.
So then Laputa, the movie's floating island.
Yeah.
Where did Miyazaki get that from?
Ah, that's a completely different kettle of fish. That comes directly from Jonathan Swift.
Gulliver's Travels.
Exactly, from Gulliver's Travels. In Swift's book, Laputa is this giant floating island. And just for context, Castle in the Sky was Ghibli's very first feature film, back in 1986.
Right, their first big one.
And it's interesting, you know, Laputa wasn't even the first title choice for the movie.
So?
Yeah, the YouTube transcript mentioned this, citing a Ghibli textbook. Early ideas were things like Pazu and the Mystery of the Flying Stone.
Okay, very descriptive.
Or The Castle in the Air, even Flying Empire. So pulling a name from Swift wasn't like the day one plan.
But Miyazaki, he's known for pulling influences from all over, isn't he? It wasn't just Swift.
Oh, definitely not. He himself talked about drawing inspiration from Indian epics like the Ramayana and the Mahabharata,
Right.
Also the Old Testament, and even a manga called The Desert Demon. It's a real blend.
A melting pot of ideas.
Yeah.
The YouTube source mentioned the Ramayana link too, right? With Sita.
It did, yeah. Pointing out the name similarity between the epic hero's wife, Sita, and the movie's heroine, Shida. But it also notes that Miyazaki apparently suggested Shida might actually come from the Greek letter, theta.
Theta.
Huh, so it's probably, you know, a mix. Different cultural ideas sparking something new.
Okay, let's dive into that Gulliver's Travels connection a bit more then. Laputa in the book. What's the deal there?
Right, so it shows up in the third part of Gulliver's Voyages. And it's this huge island, floating, powered by a giant magnet.
A magnet, okay.
And it's ruled by a king who basically uses it to hover over the land below Balnibarbi and, well, keep them in line, oppress them, really.
A tool of power. Interesting. And the people on Laputa.
Swift paints them as these incredibly eccentric scientists and thinkers, always lost in abstract thought, calculations, music, math, but totally impractical.
Like head in the clouds types, literally.
Exactly. Completely detached from everyday reality. The YouTube source even mentions that detail about servants having to gently hit them with inflated bladders just to get their attention.
Chuckles lightly. No way, that's brilliant satire.
It really is. Gulliver hangs out with them for a while, finds them pretty insufferable, actually, and eventually manages to get off the island.
And where does he go?
This is kind of a key detail later. His journey back involves passing through Japan.
Japan. Okay, tucking that away. And the name Laputa itself in Swift's book.
Yeah.
Any theories there?
Yeah, this is pretty fascinating. The theory, mentioned in the source, is that Swift might have derived it from Spanish, specifically Laputa.
Which means?
The prostitute.
Wow. Okay, so Swift was being pointed.
Extremely pointed. The idea is satirical, suggesting these lofty intellectuals are maybe, empty or morally bankrupt underneath it all, high-flying but ultimately hollow.
Right, a scathing critique. Okay, so Swift, Balnibarbi, below Laputa, and Japan. Now, you said this leads somewhere unexpected.
It really does. This is where the YouTube video takes a turn that, honestly, I didn't see coming. It highlights that geographical detail in Gulliver. Balnibarbi, the land under Laputa, is located east of Japan in the Pacific.
East of Japan in the Pacific. Got it. Why is that so important?
Because it connects completely unexpectedly to this other text, a much more obscure one called the Ospey.
Ospey. Never heard of it.
Not many have. It's a channeled text from the late 1800s, and it describes a lost continent in the Pacific, east of Japan, called Pan.
Wait, slow down. A lost continent east of Japan called Pan, just like Balnibarbi's location.
Exactly like Balnibarbi's location. And get this. According to the Ospey, this advanced civilization of Pan had a floating island above it called Huas.
You're kidding? Balnibarbi under Laputa, Pan under Huas, both east of Japan. That's weird.
It's incredibly weird, especially since Gulliver's Travels was written, over 150 years before the Ospey?
So it can't be direct influence.
No way. The YouTube source calls it likely a coincidence, and it almost certainly is, but what a coincidence, right?
Yeah, that's pretty wild. Does the Ospey connection go any further?
It does, actually. The Ospey talks about Pan being destroyed because humanity lost its harmony. This led to the scattering, the dispersal of a particular group called the Ihan.
Okay.
And some of these Ihan supposedly fled to Zapan, which the text identifies as Japan.
Dispersal after a catastrophe. That sounds familiar.
Doesn't it? It echoes some of the legends around the real Laputa people who also spread across the Pacific, possibly after or during a period of major flooding or environmental change.
And the Ihan people in the Ospey, what were they like?
Described as essentially a harmonious, nature-connected, seafaring people who scattered after a great flood.
Okay, stop right there. Harmonious, seafaring, connected to nature, dispersed after a flood. That sounds almost exactly like the descriptions often associated with the real Laputa people.
It's uncanny, isn't it? The resemblance is striking. And remember, this Owasped connection didn't come from trying to link Laputa and Laputa directly. It came from that weird geographical pinpoint in Gulliver's Travels.
Mind blown. Okay, so with Gulliver and this totally unexpected Owasped detour in mind, let's bring it back to Castle in the Sky. How does any of this stuff show up, even subtly, in the movie?
Well, the YouTube source makes a strong case, starting with the opening sequence of the film.
Which is just beautiful and tells a whole story visually.
Exactly. The video argues it basically shows the entire arc of Laputan civilization. It starts so peacefully, right? Harmony with nature, windmills powered by the wind, the breath of the earth, as the source calls it. Very idyllic.
Yeah, simple life.
But then you see the shift. Humans start digging, using fire, technology advances, those windmills get fiery boosters. Then come the big airships.
And things escalate fast.
Right, suddenly whole chunks of land are floating. But as the video points out, this ambition, this apparent disregard for their connection to nature, leads to their downfall. You see the storm, the collapse, people falling back to earth.
Fall of Laputa.
But then, look closely, the breath of the earth imagery returns, the windmills reappear. It cycles back to those peaceful, rural scenes.
So it's like a reset.
The interpretation in the YouTube video is that this suggests not just one fall, but maybe two distinct falls of civilization on Laputa. That return to nature, the reappearance of the windmills. It hints at a cycle.
Two falls. That's an interesting reading.
It is. And something else the analysis highlighted, which I thought was brilliant.
Yeah.
Look at the flying machines in that opening sequence before the final big collapse.
Yeah.
They all use propellers.
Propellers, right. Not the anti-gravity levitation stone stuff we see later in the main story.
Exactly. Which implies a whole different era of technology before the levitation stones. It really supports that idea of multiple rises and falls, different technological peaks. It's such a subtle detail.
Wow. Okay, that's clever. And the YouTube source mentions some deleted notes from Miyazaki, too.
Yeah, this is where it gets really juicy. Apparently, on Miyazaki's original image board for the film, there was a memo that read, Saint Babel Shumi.
Saint Babel Shumi. What does that mean?
Well, Babel almost certainly points to the Tower of Babel.
Okay, human arrogance, reaching for the heavens, downfall. Makes sense.
Right. And Shumi, the source suggests, might refer to Mount Sumeru, the huge mythical cosmic mountain at the center of the world in Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain cosmology.
So Tower of Babel plus cosmic mountain, that's packing a lot into the idea of Laputa, even in deleted notes.
It really shows the depth of his thinking, the different cultural threads he was weaving together.
Was there another memo?
Yes, another really crucial one the video uncovered. From heaven, Aramatama descended and reigned. As a miracle of the ever-present God, an old town floated into the sky. Now, as a sacred capital ruling the world, it reigns in the sky.
Aramatama, what's that?
The video explains it's a concept from Shinto, basically referring to the rough, active, powerful spirit or aspect of a kami, a god, or divine force, like the raw, potent energy of the divine.
Okay. Aramatama descended and reigned. So, divine beings.
That's one interpretation put forward in the video. Maybe these Aramatama, these powerful spirits, were the original creators of the floating Laputa, perhaps using some advanced technology that wasn't the levitation stone.
And their departure? Maybe that was the first fall.
Possibly. Then humans repopulate Laputa, and driven by that Babel impulse, that desire to reach the heavens again, they develop the levitation stone technology.
Leading to the second, bigger fall shown in the opening because they lost touch with nature.
That's the proposed timeline based on those memos. It creates this layered history for Laputa, explaining the cycles. It's a really compelling interpretation, I think.
It adds so much depth. And it really clicks with what Shida says later, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Her song or legend from the Valley of Gondo.
Absolutely. That whole idea of needing roots, living with the wind and the soil and the seeds, that you just can't survive separated from the earth.
It's the wisdom learned by the part of the royal family that chose to come back down, to live on the land.
Exactly. And that earth-focused philosophy, as the YouTube source points out, resonates surprisingly well with the values we often associate with the real Laputa people, that harmony with nature, that deep connection to the environment.
Another echo. It keeps happening.
And think about the timing again. The Laputa expansion, around 3,600 years ago.
Yeah.
The video notes this coincides roughly with the end of the last glacial period, a time of massive global change, rising sea levels.
Big floods.
Potentially, yes. Which brings us right back to those flood myths, the dispersal narratives, even the Oaspi story of Pan's destruction. It all seems to swirl around that same period of upheaval.
Okay, let's talk language. The YouTube video mentioned Shida's full name.
Right. Lushita Tol Ul Laputa.
Okay, break that down.
The video explains that Ul seems to mean king in the Laputan language shown in the film, and it draws a potential link to the Sumerian city of
Like ancient Mesopotamia, one of the first big cities.
Exactly, an early center of kingship. And Tul Ul is apparently glossed as meaning true king, or perhaps true Laputa.
Lushita, the true king Laputa, that's pretty significant for her character.
It really is. And compare that to Muska's name, Romuska Palo Ulaputa.
Palo Ulaputa. So he's got the ul, the king part, but not the tol.
Exactly, no truth element. The source suggests this might hint he's from a secondary, maybe less legitimate branch of the royal family.
Interesting detail. And the writing, the Laputan script itself.
Oh yeah, the video makes a big point of this. Visually, the script used on the control panels and monuments in Laputa looks incredibly similar to ancient cuneiform.
Cuneiform, the wedge-shaped writing from Sumer, Babylon.
Yes. And also similarities to old Persian inscriptions. It's not just a vague resemblance. Some of the symbols look remarkably close. It's another strong link, visually at least, to those ancient Near Eastern civilizations.
The echoes in the language, echoes in the writing. What about the look of Laputa itself?
Architecturally, yeah. The source points to those massive stone blocks, often inscribed, that make up the lower parts of Laputa.
Very solid, ancient looking.
Right. Reminiscent of megalithic construction giant stone structures, which, again, links back thematically to the real Laputa people, who were known for building megalithic sites across the Pacific.
Okay, another thematic resonance. But you mentioned one connection near the end of the video that really stood out.
Yes, this one genuinely made me pause. It goes back to the real Laputa people and that petroglyph researcher, Dr. Katsuta. According to him, the Laputa had a specific way of managing water.
How so?
They would apparently draw water from these circular depressions near the source, letting it pool there before channeling it off, a very specific technique.
Okay, interesting,
But here's the thing. That exact technique, drawing water from circular depressions near the source, is apparently depicted quite clearly in the ending credits sequence of Castle in the Sky.
No, in the end credits.
Yes. The YouTube host was pretty astonished by it, and honestly, so was I. It's such a specific, almost obscure detail. Why would that be there unless there was some awareness, some connection? It's baffling.
That is baffling. Okay, let's try and wrap our heads around all this. We started with Laputa the movie and Laputa the people, thinking maybe a tenuous link.
Right, likely separate origins.
But then we find all these echoes. Gulliver's Travels, yes, but also ancient Sumer, maybe the Owaspi, parallels in philosophy, architecture, writing, even water management techniques.
It's kind of overwhelming when you lay it all out. The fictional Laputa seems packed with these layers of meaning, these potential nods, intended or not, to real ancient history and the real Laputa.
Even if Miyazaki didn't consciously know about the Laputa water thing, for example, how do all these threads end up converging in his work? That's the big question, isn't it?
It is. How much was deliberate research? How much was subconscious influence, tapping into deeper archetypes? How much is just, well, amazing coincidence? As the YouTube source notes, it remains a bit of a mystery.
It definitely adds a whole new dimension to the film. So maybe the takeaway for you listening is, it might be time to watch Castle in the Sky again.
Definitely.
But watch it with all this in mind. Look for the cycles, the Babel references, the nature connection, the cuneiform-like script, even the end credits water source. Think about how history and myth echo in stories we love.
And it makes you wonder, doesn't it, what other fantastic stories out there might have these hidden roots in real history, real cultures, real ideas we've forgotten.
Absolutely. A great thought to ponder. And maybe keep an ear out. That How Do You Live analysis mentioned the source sounds pretty intriguing too.
Could be our next deep dive.
We'll see. For now, thanks so much for joining us down this particular rabbit hole. If you have thoughts or theories about these connections, we'd genuinely love to hear them.